Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the Wellness Dojo podcast, where we bring real solutions to real health and wellness problems. Today, we're talking about self-sabotage and personal barriers. So why do we do this to ourselves? How do we overcome this? And also, we talk about some key strategies on what you can do in order to better yourself in the future. We hope you enjoy this episode and are able to take some value from it. And let's get into it. All right. Here we are, episode 5.
Heyo.
Heyo. How you doing today?
I am doing fine and dandy. How are you doing?
Fine and dandy. I like it.
Bringing it back.
My little guy liked it when you said that.
Yeah, he was really thrown off.
Yeah, he was really thrown off.
But he liked it.
He said, "How are you doing?" You said, "Fine and dandy." And he was like, "Fine and dandy? That's a silly way to say something."
Yeah.
I love it though.
Yeah, well, you know, there's just the cadence of, hey, how are you? Good, that's good, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's good to mix things up a little bit, throw people off.
Yeah. The hey, how are you? Good, that's good has its place because it's kind of how we say hi and just at least get one sentence in there.
Yeah.
And stuff. I used to hate on small talk, but I see its place now. It's like, you know, people are like, oh, I hate doing small talk about the weather all the time. It's like, yeah, but you have to, like, you're trying to connect with someone very quickly. You have to talk about something. It's going to be the most general thing. You're not really talking about the subject matter. You're trying to connect human to human. So I've stopped really kind of hating on small talk as much as I used to. I thought I was above it. And now I'm like, no, there's a place for it. I get it now. There's a place. You start there and then you build, you know, or like it's just, a great way to reduce awkwardness in an elevator or whatever. So
that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
I'm all about reducing awkwardness where you can, unless it's a learning opportunity.
It's a very Canadian thing to do as well.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, Canadians are known for being like very apologetic, being very friendly and all that kind of stuff. And I think small talk's a big part of that too. It's just a part of the culture of like, hey, how are you? Good. Thanks. How are you? Okay. See you later. Bye. Mm-hmm. Right. As you're walking down the street. So.
And then you got to throw in well, how about this weather we're having? And
you
go, yep, it is sunny. And then you keep walking.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
How about those Canadian hockey teams?
Yeah, we got to win a Stanley Cup. That's what's about those Canadian hockey teams.
Yeah, that's
How
right.
far off topic are we already?
Oh, we're very far off topic. We should probably get into today's topic, which we're actually going to talk about self-sabotage. So, kind of self-sabotaging this intro of this podcast, for example. Nice. No, we're going to talk today about self-sabotage and, not just self-sabotage, but more specifically too, like people who put personal barriers in the way of things that they actually want to achieve, right?
Yeah, whether you can see it from the outside as the coach or healthcare practitioner, or the person admits it themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think personally that self-sabotage is something that we all deal with on some level at some point in our lives.
I would agree.
Yeah. Like I know for myself, we talked in episode 3 about kind of our martial arts journey. And I kind of talked a little bit about when I got my black belt. And that was a very difficult first year of competition for me, trying to fit in, trying to, gain respect from these other black belts, but also just like really getting my ass kicked for, a year straight is something that I really wasn't used to. And for me, a lot of self-doubt, a lot of fear, a lot of, feelings of like potential embarrassment and that type of thing started to creep in with my self-talk, with the language I was using with myself inside my head and even externally too. And, that was something for me that could have potentially have been very detrimental and considered like self-sabotage towards my ultimate goal, which was to be a leader, to be an instructor, to not just be one of the best martial artists around, but to be one of the best leaders. And so if I had listened to the thoughts in my head of like, maybe I should quit, maybe this isn't for me anymore, maybe I've reached my potential. If I had listened to that and quit, then I never would have reached the point of where I'm at today. Right. Mm-hmm. And so that would have been very self-sabotagey. Yeah.
So it's like your negative self-talk was like leading down the stream to a form of self-sabotage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think you would probably be technically correct there because sabotage, there's some sort of in order for it to be sabotage, there has to be some sort of a deliberate action. Like there's, but you were deliberately, let's say you were deliberately kind of like putting yourself through that negative self-talk and all that, then it would be considered that. What I would like to say here is just that, just caution some people out there. I think we talked about this maybe last time about the addiction. People saying, I'm addicted to this, and kind of throwing that term out there. Be cautious about throwing out, I self-sabotage myself, because it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think if you say it to yourself enough, so for people out there that kind of flippantly just kind of throw it out there, you might start believing it even if you're not doing it. So that could be a request for help, as we talked about last time too, or it's like just make sure that you're delineating between mistakes and slight missteps and full-on self-sabotage. So just be careful out there that you're telling yourself that if you're not doing it.
It's like you will start to, if you are speaking that prophecy, you will start to become that prophecy, right? If you're like, I always self-sabotage. Well, like what you're saying, it sounds like is like, well, sometimes it's not actually like self-sabotage. Sometimes you're just, you mess up once or twice or something, and
you're misstepping.
So you're saying that I can't speak today. You're saying the difference is really like with self-sabotage, it's kind of more of like a chronic thing that, a pattern, something that's been really built in, that is causing chronic disruption towards what you're looking for, versus something where it's just like, I made a mistake here or there, or I slipped up on my diet, or I did this.
Yes, and there seems to be an intentional and deliberate nature to it. It doesn't have to be full on 100%. That's why I said sometimes the person can't even really see it themselves. Then the definition kind of gets tricky, because you are supposed to kind of be seeing it. But the reason why it can exist and the person can't be seeing it is just because of our blind spots. Like someone can almost, it can seem deliberate from the outside, but maybe that person just kind of has a blind spot. But other than that, there's probably some sort of self-awareness about it happening through the pattern, through someone's lifetime, whether you see this pattern like occurring regularly throughout the year or intermittently throughout somebody's lifetime, because sometimes these things can happen on the course of years. But I think there's most likely, there's at least a level of self-awareness that what you're doing is really affecting and destroying whatever your goals are and things like that. So yes, there's some sort of an intentional, deliberate nature to self-sabotage, I would say.
Would you say, like, when we're actually talking about self-sabotage or like setting up personal barriers, that it's a deliberate attempt to protect something?
Yes, I love that. That's kind of a new take, I believe, on things like roadblocks. I don't want to say sabotage too much this episode, but like somebody mentioned self-imposed roadblocks when we were kind of talking about this on in the comments. So the concept of protection, this was something that was introduced to me maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I found it quite radical. I was listening to somebody talking. They were talking about they were working with a weight loss client, and this was actually, I think it was a naturopathic doctor. They were working with a weight loss client, and they determined, I won't really get into it because it was a long talk, but they determined that like that layer of adipose tissue, of fat, that almost can serve as a type of physical protection. That might sound funny unless you're a boxer, and like there's boxers and even MMA fighters out there that have that. Roy Nelson, for instance. I was
just thinking of him.
Roy Nelson, George Foreman, that have kind of that layer of protection. So I know it kind of sounds funny, but it's true. That's why we put on fat. It protects us. It gives us an energy source. Anyways, so the conclusion of the talk was that like this layer on the person was also almost serving as an emotional protection, because it's scary if you were for that person, if they were to lose all that weight. This is what was determined through counseling, that if they kind of lost all that weight, they wouldn't be the person struggling anymore and being cheered on by their friends and family. For them, it was about the struggle, and they didn't know what would happen if they reached the mountain.
Yep.
So they were using that fat, they were keeping it on almost as an emotional protection as well, because some people really start to develop an identity with, I did work with someone like this in Ontario. And I'll try my best just to keep every identifier, gender, age, everything just silent. But yeah, so I actually had that impression with this person as well, and there was some pretty good evidence for it, and even that I could see, and then even through talking with this person. So that was really illuminating. That you know, if you're not the person who's always struggling to lose the weight and being kind of cheered on for, oh, keep going, you're doing so well, but you've been going and struggling for a long time.
Yeah.
And there's a reason, you know, there might be a reason. And for that person in particular, it was binge eating at night, no question about it.
Yeah.
And poor sleep, which increases your cortisol and leads to weight gain and things like that over time. But yeah, really, it was like binge eating at night. And this person we really tried. Like there's all sorts of strategies for binge eating, and we tried, and at a certain point I kind of reached a conclusion like this, like maybe this is one of those cases.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen it multiple times with fitness coaching, nutrition coaching as well, because oftentimes you see people who work, like you said, they work so long and so hard at this big goal, like getting your black belt, for example, that when you're so close, it's almost within reach now. I've seen a lot of times where people actually develop a fear of like achieving this goal because there's this giant unknown on the other side of it, of like what's next, right? And that could be in somebody's career as well. If they're looking for like, you know, there's this big career opportunity, like why did I sabotage myself, or why did I put this roadblock up to not do this thing? And then you have regrets afterwards. And I've seen it a lot of times in a lot of different areas, not just fitness and nutrition, but like I said, in careers. I've experienced it at times in my career, in my fitness journey, and all those areas of my life where you're like, okay, there was a fear that was there of like, of the unknown, of like, what if I can't do this, or what if I achieve this, and then what if I lose it all? And like those kinds of fears are a very real part of that process, and very real part of why people might want to, what they might be protecting and why they might be putting that in place.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking on the spot here as I'm hearing you talk, and I'm wondering why that might happen. Someone's, you know, kind of the metaphor is it's like end of the fourth quarter and you're on the 1 yard line.
Yeah.
And you have the ball. You don't just take a knee. So why do people do that? And I think that as you're talking, I just thought, why would someone do that? Someone might do that if they've been working towards something for a while, and now they're about to get it, but they haven't gotten it yet, and there's still that chance that all this work could maybe be for nothing. Yeah. And if they fail at that last step of getting it, of passing that board exam, of passing the black belt, of whatever it is, you know, that I think that it's like cold feet before a wedding.
Yeah.
It's like, that's kind of what it reminded me of as well.
Yeah. What I'm thinking of based off your analogy is like, okay, you're on the 1 yard line. All you got to do is run it past the line. Well, at least if I take a knee, I'm taking control, and I know I'm not going to fumble if I take a knee. I know
the fumble.
Right.
Yes.
I know now that.
Sorry for the sports analogies if you're not a sports fan, people.
Yeah. But I mean, really, right? Like if I take a knee instead, if I just hold off, like, yeah, I might lose the game. I might not achieve what I came out to achieve, but at least I didn't let everybody down in a sense of like,
yeah, let's say the game is tied and you take a knee, and now it's like a nice safe choice, right?
Yeah.
Instead of fumbling and losing it. Exactly. So I think that's probably part of what's going on.
Yeah, people, you know, anybody who's in any position right now, like wherever you are in your life right now, it's, you know, like you might be struggling with something, you might be stressed out with the state of the world and everything, but at least you know right now that you are here and that you are dealing with it. Right? Like in one way or another, whether, like I said, you're struggling, whatever, but at least you're here right now. So in this moment, you have a level of comfort in knowing that, like, at least I'm here, at least I'm being right now. Whereas when we go to take that next step, when we go to take that next leap, let's call it, towards that big step or that big success, whatever it might be, well, now there's this level of discomfort as well, I think, that comes along with it of, I don't know, like, I don't know what this looks like anymore. This is outside of my usual comfort zone.
Yeah, exactly. That's a big one. It's hard to bring people kind of over that peak of the mountain as well. And it is really like that. It's like, you roll up the stone and then you're there. And then once you start to roll it down and get momentum and realize like, yeah, most people that I look up to, most people that I look at them and I go, how do they do it? A lot of that, how do they do it, is like they care less like what others, they failed probably, like just probabilities are they've failed a lot, and they've learned to either just really like radically accept themselves and just that kind of comes with not caring what others think.
Yeah,
I think that people that go into that attitude, like I don't care what other like that can go way too far and be detrimental.
I agree.
But if you do it from a place of like self-respect and self-ownership of your emotions, it's like, yeah, you almost become, to a certain extent, that you're putting on armor. You don't become bulletproof.
Yeah.
Never say that, but you do put on the armor. And so, yeah, like it's a tough one to bring people over, but when they kind of, there's that letting go of, if I slip up or if I do this or that, like there aren't that many real world consequences. It is okay. And you can kind of start to incorporate this stuff into your life. And this is where we get into that all or nothing thinking, where it's like, I can't mess up at all, or I'm a failure. I would say that's if you have that attitude, that's a form of self-sabotage.
Yeah, I would say, like, I would almost venture to say that that's a really weak mindset to have as well.
The all or nothing.
All or nothing.
Yeah, I've been a victim of that in the past.
I have
so
too.
I'm well aware.
I have too.
Yeah.
So I don't say that maliciously to anybody who like identifies as like, I hear people all the time, they're like, oh, I'm just like an all or nothing type of person, right? I don't say that maliciously saying that that's a weak mindset. I say that from experience, knowing that that mindset is a weakness to have. And I'll elaborate on that a little bit because, my theme has always been like consistency over perfection. Anytime I'm, through the Wellness Dojo coaching program or just through any personal coaching clients that I've ever had, personal training, any of that stuff, it's always been consistency over perfection.
Here.
Not all or nothing, right?
Yeah.
And the reason why I think that's a weak mindset to have is because I believe you're setting yourself up for failure if you're saying, okay, it's either I do it all and I do everything perfect or nothing at all. You're giving yourself an out now for when you inevitably do slip up, because you're a human being. You are going to make a mistake. You're going to slip, and that's an essential part of your process. So now what you're saying is, okay, when it's time for me to learn something in this process, I'm just going to quit. Like you're predetermining that when I stop, when I slip up, when I make a mistake, when I have to learn something, well, then I'm done. Right? So it's like you're almost painting the finish line before you can even see it, like before it's even there.
Imagine accepting that type of contract from an employer.
Yeah.
Because you are really, anytime you're embarking on something, you're kind of formulating a contract with yourself. You can write it out if you want, but it's almost always just kind of the silent contract. Mm-hmm. But imagine if an employer presented that to you and said, here's your contract. You can never slip up. Everything has to be perfect. Like if you slip up, not only do we fire you, but we take away all the money that you ever made and sign here. So don't do it to your friggin' self.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Like that's a really good analogy. I love the way that you said that.
Yeah, and easier said than done. And the way that you kind of drop the all or nothing thinking, one is just self-compassion, looking at other things that you do in your life, looking at anything anyone ever does, and realize that nobody does everything to perfection, and you shouldn't be expected to as well. Yeah. Right?
Is there a level of doubt that plays into that all or nothing mentality, do you think? Like when you've experienced that all or nothing, like this might be an unfair question, but like if you have had reflection after that, would you say that doubt played into that mindset of like, I'm not 100% sure if I can do this, so if I slip up a little bit, I'm just going to back off?
Yeah, doubt and comparison to the people that were like at the peak of whatever it was I was trying to do, like constant comparison to them.
Yeah.
Which never really works out. Let's see.
Which is a big thing in fitness and nutrition, and just
Yeah.
in health and wellness in general, because there's so much comparing that's going on to like, whether it's this person did this diet and got this amount, like got this result this quickly, and this person, did this workout and look how good they look and all that kind of stuff. So then people think like, well, I'm going to do this program, and if I don't get the same result, which essentially is like, I'm going to do this, if I don't get the result, then I'm just going to quit.
It is a type of almost like negative self-talk, because it's kind of like, the moment things get tough, it's you're almost telling yourself you should quit because you don't belong you don't belong here. And I think that's kind of like, I'm trying to kind of reflect back in that mindset of 20-something-year-old Dr. Riley, and kind of in real time here, and think like, what was I going through? Yeah, doubt. And now I'm kind of realizing that all or nothing, it's kind of a negative self-talk when you really dissect it, because you're kind of telling yourself you're not good enough to do this thing. You should probably just quit. There's signs already that you're not going to be the best, and therefore move on to something else. But then you move on to something else, you're probably just going to do it with that other thing too.
Absolutely. It's a tough thing, and like I said, like you said, it's much easier said than done to just go like, well, I'm just not going to think that way anymore. Well, I know these are things that are probably have been built as a pattern through your life, built as habits through your life to have that mindset. And luckily it's not permanent. Like, nothing is permanent. You can always start to turn that around. And so we've talked about a lot of things that, like, the reasons why people might self-sabotage, or why people might set up these roadblocks. Like, there's fear, there's doubt, there's this comfort, all or nothing mentalities, right? So when we look at all of those things, what do you think is like a good place for people to start in order to maybe start to turn the tide a little bit more in favor of actually achieving things?
I would say that, so anytime like somebody either self-sabotages, or, there's that or procrastinates, or kind of does something to harm themselves in one way or another, I would just say that it's probably a tip of the iceberg kind of thing. There's probably something deeper going on, and there's something deeper to uncover. So, it's going to go along the lines of like self-respect, self-compassion, self-love, unresolved trauma. If you had a parent or a guardian or loved one telling you weren't good enough, and I do see this like all the time in my patients, and then they kind of start to learn to believe it, and then they tell themselves. So a place to start, that's a tough one, but I would say that it's a tip of the iceberg type of scenario. There's probably something a little bit deeper. So I do want to be a little bit more concrete on that. So if we're out there, if you want to kind of reflect on this, first ask yourself what the negative emotion is. That's the first step. So go beyond I self-sabotage. Okay, well, there's a why element, but we'll get there. First, what's kind of that emotion? Well, I think it's fear. Now that I break it down, it's something like that. Okay, and then you have to go one step further and go, where does the fear come from in your history, in your life? If it's not one thing, is it multiple? And if it's multiple, well, then we have to start challenging that core belief. And you could almost ask yourself, okay, I recognize that there's fear here. What is scary about this? Like, what is actually scary about this? And what have I been scared of before? Like, start to like connect some of those dots together as well. And I think essentially what you're saying is the first step would be reflection. Like it is for most cases, most things that we've talked about on this podcast so far, it usually starts with a level of reflection of saying like, okay, I need to stop. I need to assess what's happening here, because we live such go lives that we often find it, we live such all or nothing lives often that it's hard to stop, because then if you stop to reflect, well, now I'm not making progress, right? Because I stopped. We need to go. There's always something for me to do, always another task, always another chore, always another, action that I need to be taking. Well, maybe the action you need to be taking first is to stop, start asking yourself some questions. And you mentioned something before we started recording. You mentioned something really interesting about like when you are
like admitting or recognizing self-sabotage on yourself, you're almost recognizing that there's almost like two separate selves.
Right. How else can you self-sabotage? There almost has to be two selves in there.
Yeah.
Right, in the brain, in the spirit, whatever you want to say. But let's break it down into more practical terms. Sure, there really are kind of different centers in the brain for different functions and even emotions. So there can be two selves in the sense that, like, your emotional fight or flight reptilian, this is kind of like what like the deep centers of the brain, the primitive centers of the brain, they can kind of be fighting it out with the prefrontal cortex and kind of the more decision making. So there can actually be two types of selves here. There can be the fearful automatic self, which exists in certain what's that one called? Anyways, I won't get into the centers right now, and then there's like, yeah, so how else can you sabotage unless there is kind of like two selves? It's like or you can think of it as the angel and
I was just gonna say
the devil on your shoulders,
yeah.
Right? In less practical terms, but more identifiable terms. So how else can that function? Well, it has to be. So, what's going on there? What's going on there if there's almost like two selves? Well, I think that one self is the self that wants to progress and wants to go down a certain path and really wants the best for you, but just kind of an image of the best for you. It's not really thinking of all the hard work that it takes to get there. It's just kind of an image, but it knows that it wants to go down that path. And then there's the other self, in this case, the sabotaging self. And the sabotaging self can be a self that either learned patterns from people in their life and heard that they were subpar and worthless and things like that. And it breaks my heart to hear these things from people, but it does happen. And so what do you do then when you kind of have these two competing selves? So there's this old analogy about the two wolves that exist in everyone, and it's almost like the light and the dark, and the evil and the good, and we all encompass that as human beings. And so there's these two wolves, and they're both hungry as you're developing and as you're going through your years, and the one that you feed becomes more powerful and becomes able to pin the other metaphorical wolf down on the ground, so to speak.
Yeah.
So the good news is you can starve the self-sabotaging self, the other self, and you can feed more of that positive, the light energy, like that type of self. But it takes time and it takes repetition. But over time, you can kind of feed that the positive self to a point where it can now pin down. The self-sabotaging self might still exist, and it might still be a decent sized wolf. But if you build that other sized person up, in this case the metaphorical wolf, it can start to pin the self-sabotaging, and like they both exist, but you like learn to control it. And so that is really prefrontal cortex, that is decision making, that is awareness, and that's what I believe really truly makes us conscious, is that area of the brain. And so you can upregulate that area with enough practice, and you can downregulate those other fear centers and emotional and fight or flight over time.
Yeah, and I mean, let's not get it twisted either. Carrying on with the analogy of the wolves, like wolves travel in packs, right? So we're not looking to starve this other side or this other wolf, this sabotage wolf. We're not looking to starve it to the point where it's gone, it's dead, right? That wolf, that sabotage probably is serving some purpose for you. Mm-hmm. But like you said, you have the option to decide. You get to make that decision on which one of these am I going to feed more and make stronger in my life. Because that sabotaging wolf, that those negative self-talk thoughts that are continuing to pop up, or those things in your past that happened that have instilled this mindset into you, those serve a purpose in your life still. Like that serves a purpose in your decision-making process. You do have to assess risk when you are looking to make a decision. Maybe it's a career change. Like you do have to have some level of those thoughts. But if those thoughts are being fed so much more than these other thoughts of like what potentially could go right here, right? Not just what could go wrong, but what could go right. Like if you haven't fed those thoughts at all, then the sabotage is going to, you know, be winning those battles, right? It's going to be pinning the other one down. But like what I'm trying to say here is that you're always going to have both, and I think they both serve a purpose for you. You just have to decide which one do you want to grow stronger.
Yeah. And the reason I really like this analogy is because it's really helpful to put form, even in, you know, imagination sense, to put form to something.
Yeah.
Because normally we're just subject to thoughts just kind of swirling around in the ether, like, and they're really hard to kind of grab onto. But when you visualize that, you know, yes, there's almost like two sides, two beings. You feed them. What happens when you feed something? It actually gets bigger, and they're actually kind of competing.
Yeah.
In a sense. So, yeah. So consider that.
And okay, so how do we start to feed that better wolf, that positivity wolf in our mind? How do we start to feed that more?
Yeah, well, I do some of this when I co-manage like addictions cases, because when there's a like a compulsion to use drugs or alcohol or whatever it may be, that is coming from the limbic system, that reptilian kind of deep center there. So what it takes, the way that you upregulate the good side, the positive side, what I'm calling the prefrontal cortex, is awareness. And awareness doesn't just happen. So awareness first of the thought. So it's like of the negative self-sabotaging thought, because there's almost always some sort of, even if it's like an unconscious kind of subtle thought, you're thinking about it first, almost certainly, before you engage in the action.
Yeah.
Very rarely do we just impulsively, like with zero thinking, just go do something. That's, you know, we do that when we touch a hot stove, but we don't do that when we, like, there's some sort of awareness of it. There's some sort of a prodromal, like there's a trigger like beforehand that we can see cognitively.
This is part of the distinction between sabotage and oops, I made a mistake as well, right? Oops, I touched that stove, it was hot. Self-sabotage might say, I'll bet if I touch that stove, it's probably gonna hurt.
Yes. Yeah.
Touch and ow.
Yes, yeah.
Right? This is the difference.
Yeah. So then the way that in that scenario you would go, I'm gonna touch the stove. It's probably gonna hurt, and then you have to condition yourself, and you do that with someone, you know, like myself or with Kyle, to go, I'm about to touch this. It's hot. Wait. This is the trigger. This is a self-sabotaging thought, and you catch yourself.
Yeah.
You have to learn, like, that first catch yourself, it's like when you're like staring at those 3D images and like all of a sudden it just pops out and you just go, whoa. Like sometimes you catch yourself and you go, oh my goodness, there it is.
There it is.
And so you have to learn how to catch yourself. You have to even like bring that awareness to the forefront. Then you can kind of go through this process. And there's many different acronyms about, there's one even called STOP, STOPP, where it's like the first S is literally stop, T is take a breath. So you don't just passively take a breath. You like take a slow breath. You like feel the temperature change of the cool air coming through your nose. You like feel the drop in your chest and shoulders and in your rib cage when you take that nice like exhale out.
Yeah.
So stop, take a breath. O is for observe. Observe what's going on. I'm about to touch this hot stove. Do I need to be doing this? Why am I doing this? And then for P, it's like proceed after you've kind of come up with a conclusion of, oh, this isn't good. You've caught yourself. This isn't good. I like to really keep a journal in that case with patients that I work with, because that really helps them, you know, solidify that they caught themselves, and then they can kind of serve as a highlight reel if they keep that like this kind of journal. But yeah, so that is how it starts.
Yeah, like what you say about like awareness, like stop, assess, be aware of what is actually happening. And then, you know, with that as well, I also really like what you say about journaling, because you'd mentioned before about the thoughts are just kind of going in midair. I find with journaling, what you're able to do is, you know, whether it's after the fact, like let's say you've experienced some self-sabotage and now you're trying to reflect on it. Well, instead of just having all these things floating around inside your head, now you can actually grab those things, put them on paper, and actually start to, you know, write those things down and get more of an outside perspective onto those things as well, right?
Yep. So that is at least one starting point for this. Yeah, there's another one out there. It's like the 4 R's. It's like recognize, where you recognize the thought, you like refocus or something like. Anyways, I don't want to. It's the 4 R's, and it was originally developed for OCD. The only reason I'm bringing it up is because there seems to be some parallels in, like, because self-sabotaging is a lot like chronic binge eating and things like that.
Yeah, yep.
And there is this kind of like obsession compulsion matrix happening here with self-sabotage. I wonder if I could probably, since we have technology, I can actually bring it up and then I don't have to like pull it out of my head.
Yeah. And another thing with self-awareness that you talked about is, you know, when you are recognizing why, like, what am I feeling around this as well? I know that's kind of like my go-to, is like recognizing your feelings and that type of thing. But part of self-awareness is asking yourself, what is this decision giving me? Right? So like, let's use a very extreme example again, back to touching the stove that was hot. Okay. I stopped. I recognized that, okay, if I touch that stove, it's probably going to hurt. Well, I still touched it. What did that give me? Like, what did I gain from that? Did I all of a sudden have a rush of people coming to check and see if I was okay? And that gave me some level of like feeling of compassion or feeling supported or those types of things. Like, oftentimes when we're doing these things, there's a negative outcome, but there's also a positive outcome. There's something that we are gaining from that thing. And that's a really important piece of this puzzle of self-awareness, because self-awareness is often a very complex puzzle. That's a big piece of it, understanding why am I doing this? Because that's, I don't know about you, but do you hear a lot of people that are often like, I just don't understand why I keep doing this to myself?
Yes, I do hear that. So there is awareness. Yeah, and that's when that's very frustrating, because it is self-imposed roadblocks. They're aware of it, they're admitting it, but they're like, I'm having a hard time controlling it, which is what I'm finding today as we're talking through this and having experience, lots of experience co-managing addiction cases. I'm like, I never really realized that, just self-sabotage in the world of like, weight loss or starting to meditate or trying to do all these new, like, there's a lot of parallels here. Yeah. Because if something has negative consequences and it's kind of getting out of control and you're trying to stop and it's affecting other areas of your life, I mean, you're touching on a lot of the inclusion criteria for having an addiction. Yeah. Right there. So yeah, some interesting parallels. I just want to take a mulligan here. So the 4 R's. So the 4 R's are recognize. So you recognize that you're having an intrusive thought, or you're having kind of like that first spark of this could turn into some sort of a roadblock or a sabotage incident. So it's recognize, and then it's relabel that. So the thought comes into binge eat, you recognize it, you relabel it like, no, this actually doesn't help. This is just an intrusive thought. This is just kind of almost like an obsessive thought, and I don't have to identify with it. That's what's very important, is if you don't really distinguish between the two selves. Yeah. Like that one self, it really can say like that, the more positive, the higher self can go, I know that these other thoughts are happening, but I don't necessarily have to identify with it and make it, completely merge with my impression of myself. Yeah. And so we have recognize, we have relabel.
Before you move on to the next one, I just wanted to kind of talk on relabel a little bit, because I think there's probably people who are listening, if you have experienced like chronic self-sabotage, or you recognize that you have been quote unquote sabotaging yourself or setting up roadblocks for yourself in different areas of your life. They might be thinking like, well, this is all great, but how do, like, it sounds good to go like, okay, I'm gonna stop, I'm gonna recognize, I'm gonna relabel, but then in the moment, people can often think like, oh, this is just unrealistic for me. Yeah. Right. But this relabeling, it takes practice. Like,
exactly. You're probably gonna go through the process and you might still fail the first few times, especially with like my addictions patients. Yeah. I tell them, it's like, just because I give you this handout and we go through this today doesn't mean that this is going to cure you. It's like, this is a process. Yeah. You might go through this. You might be you might get a grade of Like 1 point out of 100 the first time you attempt it. You barely attempt it, barely works. You fall into the old pattern.
This is not all or nothing.
But what about the next time? What about the next time? It's like, okay, I kind of get this exercise a bit better. Okay, I'm going to try this again. I'm going to recognize, I'm going to relabel, and then I'm going to refocus my attention on something else and something more positive. Well, now you're at 50 points out of 100 on that try, especially, you know, and then you kind of like, it does. And this is about feeding that other wolf side of you. It's been starving for so long, and the other side is so strong because the other side has had a million repetitions of negative self-talk, and this other side about positive self-talk is very rare. And so over time, that's how you change the balance.
And would you say that within relabel, that's where the opportunity is to say like, okay, what is this thing giving me, and what, like, how do I feel before this thing? How do I feel during this thing? And how do I feel after this thing? Because I know with people who struggle with like eating vegetables or snacking in the evening, that's one thing that I'll often tell them is like, okay, whether you snack or don't snack, recognize, like what you just said, recognize first what is happening right now. Okay, I have this urge to snack. Now let's start to, we call it like relabel, and you can correct me if I'm off because I know this is your thing here. But with relabel, that's where I would maybe say people are going to stop and say, okay, last time when this happened, I felt like shit afterwards. I was angry with myself. I regretted it. I was disappointed. I almost felt like borderline depressed afterwards because I was so let down on myself. What, you know, when they look at that, is that an opportunity in that relabel for them to say, okay, maybe this isn't the best choice for me because of what I experienced before?
Well, I think that the relabel step is where your ultimate power lies. I think recognizing is good, but relabeling is, because anytime you're kind of relabeling, you're taking control. You're evaluating, because you can kind of relabel it something that you choose. You're putting a new moniker on it, so you're taking control. You're taking control. You're evaluating. So I do think that is really kind of that's where the magic step is. For myself, I went through a bout of counseling, I don't know, over 10 years ago, 15 years ago, something like that. And what we came up with, myself and my counselor, about like my relabel for my thinking, it was just something that that resonated me with them was something called stinky thinking. And that's what we used, and that's what we labeled it. And you know what else it does when you call it something like that? It takes the power away.
Yeah, 100%.
It takes the power away. It's not some big scary demon anymore. It's just stinky. It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
So that was really awesome. Shout out to that person who helped me out long time ago. But yes, so that the relabel, I think, is where your power is.
And then you said the third R is refocus.
Yeah, so refocusing your attention is very important. Changing your environment, even if that means getting up from the couch and going into a different room. Refocusing your attention that's also a really powerful step, and it should be refocusing into something that is either pleasurable or constructive, right?
Yeah, and a good example of this could be, especially in today's day and age, where we've talked about people are spending a lot more time working from home in some places, where, you know, or even at the office, but you get stuck at the desk and you're like, why do I keep doing this to myself? I'm working nonstop. I keep skipping lunch. I know I should be having lunch. This refocus can be a really big step for that for a lot of people too, because now you're saying like, okay, I'm going to change my environment. I'm going to go take a 5-minute walk outside, and that might rejuvenate you to then like have more energy for the rest of the day. You might start to now be able to go back and recognize, oh, okay, I recognize that when I do refocus, when I do change my environment, I'm actually more productive. I actually do feel better.
Yeah, and you're not stuck in that original thought,
you're breaking the pattern, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, all right. We want to touch on a couple more things here today, because we did, you did kindly put out a post and asked for people to give input on their own self-imposed roadblocks and self-sabotaging behavior. So I want to touch on a couple of them. And
thank you, by the way, to everybody who commented and shared their insights and a little bit of vulnerabilities as well.
Yeah. So, well, I briefly mentioned procrastination.
Yeah.
But that was one that came up, and maybe we can just kind of do more kind of rapid fire.
Yeah, let's do it
on these ones.
Yeah.
So, do you mind if I take
procrastination
quickly?
Take it.
So with procrastination, it very, very similar to some of the other negative self-talk that I was talking about. So procrastination, I believe we pretty much have it figured out. Procrastination occurs due to a negative feeling attached to whatever you're procrastinating. So it could be, like fear of failure or what have you, because sometimes these tasks, it's like the actual calories it takes to sit at your computer and like send that email or do the online or like do your taxes or whatever, like the actual calories that it takes isn't much. It's not like it's not a physical exhaustion, it's an emotional one. So there is some sort of a negative emotion attached to it. You have to determine what it is. And then you have to go one step further. This is key. You have to go one step further and ask yourself, why? Why is that negative emotion there? Is there good reason for it to be there? Is there enough good reason that it's causing all this procrastination? And if there is, well, you probably need some assistance after that.
Yep.
Do you have any thoughts on procrastination?
I think you've like pretty much nailed it. Like that's, yeah, I don't have anything really to add to. I mean, I'm sure we could talk for another hour on procrastination, but I think you hit the main points that that are really impactful for people is like stop, recognize, assess, why am I doing this, and start that process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do this with myself like all the time.
Same. Yeah.
All the time now
Same.
that I kind of realize what procrastination is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really relieving.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. What else we got on this list?
Okay, let's see here. Oh, keeping yourself accountable. Now this was, I liked this because it was like I can keep, I'm accountable to others, but I can't keep myself accountable.
Yeah.
Yeah, common.
It is.
Not too surprising, really. There's no, you know, when you're, sorry, I don't want to, like, I got to make sure I let you talk.
No,
here.
you go, man.
Like when you're being accountable to others, it's probably because either you're fearing reprisals of not being accountable to them, especially if there's some sort of contractual obligation, but it's also probably because you have respect for that person. And if they're expecting something of you, you have enough respect to them to elevate yourself to the level where you're getting done what you have to do. So when it comes to yourself, and if you're not getting it done, it might come down to an issue of self-respect. That could be lacking. Anyways,
I think
I'll
there's
throw it over to you.
I think there's also a level of things that have been passed down from generation to generation, like that type of thing. Like for myself, I'm a parent. I've got 3 kids, and you know, we just yesterday set up a chore chart for my kids.
Nice.
Right? So they've got these chores they're gonna do. We're gonna give them a little bit of an allowance if they complete all their chores, those types of things. Now, what this is actually doing over time, and what has happened to me over time as well, is this system that's being built into, let's call it my nervous system of, okay, I'm going to do what mom and dad say. When I do what they say, there will be a reward or there will be a punishment, right? Or what's the other
Consequence?
word? Thank you. I can't think of words today.
Yeah.
There will be a consequence, not punishment, but there will be consequences. I will not get my allowance if I do not do these things. And that is something that is very, very similar to what we're talking about. Where I have people all the time who say, I have to have a personal trainer because I just won't work out for myself. I have to, I don't want to let them down, having that accountability of that person.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that's almost built into us. And I don't think it's necessarily a negative thing either, right? There's a real positive to saying like, I need to be accountable to other people. I think that there's a gray area where you should be accountable to yourself as well, because you should have the self-respect to say like, no, I'm worth this for myself. But it's not the worst thing to say like, well, there's certain areas of my life where I can stay accountable to myself, and there's other areas where I don't want to have to think about what workout to do. Or people who ask for meal plans all the time, which I don't do meal plans, but I understand why people want them. They don't want to think about that. They've got enough on their plate. They don't want to think, pun intended, they don't want to think about what do I have to cook tonight? Or they don't want to think about what workout am I doing tonight. They want it put out for them so they can stay accountable to that person. That person will check in. It's one less thing to think about in this crazy, chaotic world. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's necessarily fully negative to say like I have to rely on other people, but there should be a level of respect for yourself where you're saying like, I know I'm doing this for me, even if I want to outsource some help for it.
Oh yeah. Okay. Maybe one more.
Let's do one more. Yeah. What do you got?
Well, I would have to maybe bring up the old list ski. There's something about.
There was another one that was. Let's go with. We've touched on this already, so it'll be quick. But eating my emotions was one that I saw in there.
Interesting.
It's like eating my emotions. So this emotional eating aspect, which is very, very relevant right now with a lot of people. There's these jokes going around about people who have gained that, that COVID 20 pounds and stuff like that through the pandemic and this type of thing. And, essentially stress eating.
Yes. Yeah, I can totally see that being a form of self-sabotage, especially if at the same time you kind of have these lofty health goals for yourself. We've touched on before that the fight or flight nervous system, like its inverse is the rest and digest. And so one of the ways, if you're really stressed out, to almost force the body to go into rest and digest is to eat. And then the other component of that is just the adrenaline and dopamine rush that binge eaters get from from like whatever pleasure, whether it's taste or texture or what have you. But so eating, there's a couple things you can try to do with that. You can try to just make sure you front load your calories kind of during the day when you tend to probably eat healthier foods for breakfast. That just kind of eliminates a little bit of binge eating probability at the end. It of course doesn't eliminate it. It's just like one of the first things we would tell somebody, just make sure you kind of front load your calories at the breakfast and lunch and things like that. But not to sound like a broken record, but obviously emotional eating is going to be another tip of the iceberg kind of thing. Yeah.
I love how you describe it as as an impact on the nervous system and the rest and digest, because that's not something that that's not a way that I've typically explained it to people, right? But it's so true. It's like your body's natural instinct to say like, okay, we need to relieve some stress here. This is one of the quickest ways that we can do it, right?
Yeah.
I think that's massive. And then I think the other thing is, you're eating for stress, so let's figure this stress thing out.
Yeah, exactly. That's the next thing, right? It's like, if that is what the body's doing, if you may be emotional eating because the body's kind of like saying, hey, please help me. I don't want to be in fight or flight all the time. Well, why are you in fight or flight? Can we review some ways that you've found success in stress relief before? Can we apply that today? Can we kind of take stress eating that is probably offering you some sort of temporary relief, and can we can we switch it out for something that's more sustainable that gives you a similar result?
Yeah, like the one example that I'll give with that is, because I've dealt with this a lot with stress eating and helping people kind of recover from stress eating, or to at least dampen it a little bit, make it a little bit less, is I often will explain it to people as like having a tube, right? You have this tube and you keep packing things into this tube, and eventually the pressure has to come out of this tube, right? So let's say it's work, it's kids, it's a fight with your significant other, and like all these things keep compounding throughout your day or throughout your week. Well, if you're not letting any pressure out of this tube at all, and you just keep putting in, or the analogy of like carrying things on your shoulders is another one, right? Eventually something's got to give. You have to relieve that pressure. And oftentimes what's the quickest way to do that is to get that quick adrenaline rush, that quick endorphin rush from, eating that cookie that makes you feel so good for that brief moment of time. But it's at least let some of that pressure out. It's a quick way to do it. It doesn't require any real work, right? But what you want to do is, if this is something you relate to, first of all, go back and listen to episode 4, because we talked for an hour on stress and how to deal with stress, how to recover from stress, how to manage stress better. But really, like, take the time and start to understand that stress a little bit. Start to understand those emotions. Maybe it's not stress, maybe it's anger, maybe it's whatever. Understand those emotions, start to recognize them, and go through exactly what we've talked about with everything else that deals with self-sabotage is, go through those steps, recognize, right? You're going to remap it almost, and like re-envision, like, what does this actually mean for me? Understand it. And then another thing is like what you talked about with refocus, is like you can also change your environment, right? That might be a method of stress relief, is by changing your environment.
Let's get to one last one, because it just popped up and I was thinking about the list of the comments, and someone said something about fear of missing out, FOMO.
Oh yeah, FOMO.
Yeah. Let's touch on that quickly.
Yeah. We were both a little bit like, we had to kind of think about this one when we saw it, right? Is we were like, okay, like how do we Like, first of all, I think this is something where I would want to really have a conversation with the individual to really figure out like what's going on, like to understand like what do you mean by like this fear of missing out? Because in the example that was given, it was like eating chips and also actually alcohol. It's like fear of missing out. And I think alcohol is a little bit easier to understand, where it's like, okay,
especially in a social setting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even chips, I can see at a social setting being passed around at there's a big chips bowl at the party or whatever. Okay. So I can see where they're going with this.
Yeah. This fear of missing out on
that everyone else is enjoying this delicious birthday cake except for you, or someone's making like homemade martinis and you're trying not to drink alcohol. Okay. Yes, I get it now.
It's starting to come to us now.
Yeah, okay. I can see that. And so then you engage in that. But is that self-sabotage? I wonder. Or
I think it depends if you're intentionally going in to an evening and saying like, okay, tonight I am not going to drink wine because I know that I've been drinking too much wine. It's affecting my results. It's affecting my sleep. It's affecting this. And I want to make those things better. And you're having those thoughts every single night, but then you're still like, I'm just going to have that glass of wine, right? I really think it relates very closely to what we've been talking about for this entire hour, this entire 57 minutes that we've been talking, right? I think that all of these steps can really help in that situation still, right? You can stop yourself and say like, okay, I recognize what I'm doing. Let's start to figure out like, what is this? First of all,
relabel it to FOMO or something that's, like resonates with you personally. So at least you know what it is.
Absolutely.
So that was really great on that person's part to at least have that recognition.
Absolutely. And then it's also
and then refocus. Go talk to somebody different. Get
a different opinion. Just maybe get it out of your head and onto a piece of paper or into somebody else's ear. But also recognize, what is this thing giving me? Okay, so I know the negative things it's giving me. What's the positive thing that it's giving me?
Right, and so I think that's where the FOMO, fear of missing out, is coming from. Is they might be in a situation like we talked about earlier, where we're at a party and someone's making homemade drinks behind the bar or whatever. So it's like this is tough because the brain is kind of tricking you into saying, go for this quick pleasure right now, and you're not really thinking about the future. You're not really thinking about your goals. Like something that I do for myself is I kind of ask myself whether you're doing it in the moment or you're kind of reflecting the next day in anticipation for it happening again. But I just kind of go, well, if I would have had that thing, like, would have it made any difference, any positive difference to me today? Like when you wake up the next day after a party, it's like, no, whether you have those chips or not, it actually has like, it's not going to have any, if you don't have those, it's not like the next day you're going to be feeling it. Like you really missed out on, it's like it just in the moment, your brain's just kind of playing this trick on you to go get that thing, go get the thing, right?
It's like weighing your emotions almost. It's like, okay, these are the positive emotions that come from having this thing. These are the negative emotions. Which one's heavier? If the negative emotions are heavier, then for a lot of people, that's a realization that they maybe haven't taken the time to really see. It's like, wow, like the negative emotions I'm feeling are way heavier than the positive ones. Sometimes that's a way to just check yourself the next time. Oh yeah, remember last time, like those negative emotions were so much heavier than the potential positive emotions.
Yeah.
And then from there, another thing that I think you can do is you can stop yourself and say, what else can give me that positive feeling? Right? Mm-hmm. Oh, that glass of wine at the end of the night really relaxes me. What else might relax me? Stretching?
A
walk outside?
Yeah, some nice like nighttime teas that have zero negative effects on your health. So
yeah, it's huge. It's huge. And can I give one example before we wrap up?
Sure.
So I had a client at one point in time, and they were really struggling. And this is actually a common thing, but just thinking of one specific example in my head, they were struggling with after dinner, they would sneak into the pantry away from the kids, away from the family, and they would have like a cookie. And they knew this was like not serving them well, but they couldn't seem to figure out, why am I doing this? And when we looked at this and we said, what is that cookie giving you? Like by sneaking away to the pantry and having that cookie, like what is it really giving you? And after some thoughtful conversation, we realized that they were just looking for an escape. Dinner time was really stressful, just trying to get the kids to eat. There's often arguments and like maybe a little bit of yelling and that type of thing. And it was stressful. So as soon as dinner was done, it's like they needed an escape. So they went and locked themselves in the pantry, had a cookie, gave them that little bit of a rush, and then they were done with it. They moved on and did the rest of their evening routine. Well, what we tried was we said, well, let's try and like escape somewhere else other than the pantry. What if you went outside and just had it, a 2-minute just breathing in some fresh air, right? It doesn't matter if it's -30, if it's +20, you can go outside for 2 minutes, get some fresh air, see what that does. And it's like for months and months later, they were like, yeah, I haven't had that cookie. I just go outside instead, and much more positive. It's not impacting their caloric intake now. And really like a simple quote unquote fix.
Yeah. Awesome. Getting down more to the root cause of things is
absolutely,
it's hardly ever a bad roadmap towards positive change. So,
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. Well, quick review.
Yeah, you want to kick off the review here?
Sure. So we talked about what self-sabotage is in the first place. It's something that's very common. It's some sort of an intentional and deliberate action that's antithetical to what seems to be your healthy goals and positive path in your life. So why do we do it? There's a lot of reasons. I believe it's probably a tip of the iceberg thing where there's underlying fear of failure. Where there's, just like the self-doubt, fear of failure. Maybe you've experienced a lot of negativity and talk throughout your upbringing and things like that. So these types of things have to be parsed out a little bit. There's many different reasons why we might self-sabotage, but the solutions kind of remain the same. That you have to become aware of what it is. You have to relabel it for something where you're now taking over control and a little bit of power. You have to refocus your attention away from that type of thinking, and then you have to reflect on what worked, what didn't, and how you can proceed going forward.
And once you've done that, you can start to make some small changes, right? You can start to create some new habits. You can start to really check yourself when that situation pops up again, and really just put those things to practice. Put that mental reflection into practice. And some of the strategies that we talked about for doing that, one of them is talking to somebody like Dr. Riley or myself, or maybe it's a counselor or a therapist or whatever. Like maybe it's a friend or a family member, but talk to somebody and get that conversation started, get it outside your head and somewhere else. And then also journaling, right? Like write these things down, give yourself an opportunity to look at it. I talk about flip the script all the time. So write these things down, flip the script. What else could this mean? Right? Okay, I'm scared. What else could that fear be? Right? Yes. And looking at those things, and when you let it out of you and put it towards, like I said, a piece of paper or a person, oftentimes you can gain a whole new perspective on some of these things that we've been really stuck in one perspective.
Yes. All right, everyone. Well, with that said, I'll say my little piece and I'll turn it over to you, but we wish you much love and happiness and prosperity, and thank you so much for being with us today. It means the world to us.
Yeah, we really appreciate you guys listening. Hopefully you're able to take some value from this episode again, and we'll see you guys in episode 6.
See you next time.
Bye.